Dear viewers, welcome to our special conversation on coronavirus outbreak. No, I'm not the only person in the screen. I'll bring another guest for you in a while. For a few days, I'm discussing about this pandemic in my social media network. Obviously, it was in Bengali language, as most of the folks in my Facebook are Bangla speaking. But today's episode is not only for my Facebook, it is a bit larger. I'm doing it for our Washington-based right group, Right to Freedom. You can watch it in our web page alongside with social media. Yes, it is time to bring my guest, Ambassador William B. Milam, President of the Right to Freedom, former U.S. Ambassador in Bangladesh, and senior scholars of the Wilson Center. Hello, Ambassador. How are you?
Bushwick, I am fine, and I'm very happy to be with you again. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, I guess you are maintaining staying home order. So how you are passing the days?
Well, I am in a what they call a social distancing mode. So I don't go out very much, but I do go out at least once a day, or try to go out once a day for a walk, which I have just come back from. And I have to go out occasionally to buy food, because I do have to eat, and perhaps I don't have to eat as much as I do, but I do have to eat. And I spend a lot of time talking to people on Zoom, like I am talking to you right now, and a lot of time looking at events on Zoom. I just saw one today on the Middle East and the human rights situation there. And I spend a lot of time also reading and do some writing, as you well know. So I'm keeping fairly busy. In fact, sometimes I wonder if I'm not busier than before the coronavirus came and put us all into hiding. But then I think it's probably just that I'm less efficient when I'm in this mode and don't get things done in quite as organized a way. But anyway, I'm doing okay. I'm keeping healthy, I think, and trying to stay healthy, which is the major objective these days. So I'm okay. And how are you? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
That's good to know.
Yeah. When we are talking about coronavirus, death toll crossed 300,000 and more than 4 million people affected around the globe.
Yes.
And US position is on top. Why is that? Why US is leading this pandemic?
Well, I would like to say the only reason is because we're one of the biggest countries in the world, the third largest population in the world, I think, after China and India. But I have to tell you that it is primarily because our government was totally unprepared and totally inept and incompetent in the first few months, and still is in reacting to the coronavirus and the COVID-19 disease. So I think, although we might be pretty high up just because of our large population, but I think it's primarily because the government was totally incompetent, and it is our unfortunate situation right now in the United States to be governed by an inept president and an inept administration and an inept party.
Yeah.
So this is going to sound terribly partisan, but that's the way I feel about it.
Yeah, according to John Hopkins' report, today's death toll crossed 83,000.
Yes, I've heard that already. Yes.
Yeah. So do you think President Trump and his administration was skeptical about the virus at the beginning of the pandemic?
I'm not quite sure what motivated them, if they had any motivation. My guess is that they may have been skeptical because the president doesn't seem to believe in science, and he was being told by the scientists that some bad times were coming and we should get ready for them and prepare for them. I think also it's because he was only interested, he's only really interested in being reelected yet again, and he's put politics well above safety and security. I think at this point, the safety and security of the people of the United States.
Yeah. If we look back to history, how you will differentiate between the current outbreak and the previous pandemic the world has experienced?
Well, that's an interesting question, Musfik. Most people wouldn't answer that, so that shows that you have very good taste and a wide-ranging intellect, and so that makes me feel good too.
Thank you.
I think the most comparable example is because we've had pandemics off and on for the last 50 years. There was a pandemic that didn't really kill many people that hit the United States in 1857. Yeah. I know because I got very sick. I was in bed for 3 weeks with a terrible influenza. I was a college student at the time. I was a first or second or third year student at Stanford University. I was so sick that I barely could function. I went to the doctor, and the doctor said to me, this is a Stanford University doctor, he said, you're pretty sick, and you should go home and go back to your room and go to bed and not get up until you feel better. Here, and he gave me a whole bunch of pills to take, but he also said, I'd put you in the hospital, except there are no beds left. So Stanford Hospital was already filled with other students who were even worse than me. But I do remember that extremely well because it's probably the sickest I've ever been. And I was miserable for 3 weeks. I finally got over it. I missed not quite half of the quarter. Thank God that I didn't flunk any of my courses, but I managed to get through the courses okay. But pandemics, we were getting pandemics that long ago and even probably before, but the big one was in 1918 when, which was maybe even worse than the present one. It's called the Spanish flu. And people seem to think from that it started in Spain. Absolutely, it didn't. It started in the United States. Did you know that?
Oh, I don't know that.
It started in Kansas.
Why people are calling the Spanish flu?
Well, remember in 1918, there was a world war going on. We were at war. The whole continent of Europe was at war, except for Spain. And countries at war are stupid in many ways. And all of the countries that were affected, and I think the third world was affected. India was affected. What was then British India was affected pretty badly. I think something like 12 million people died. But we didn't get much news from that part of the world in those days. The part of the world that we would have gotten news from, which was Europe, had such censorship. They censored it all out of the news. So no newspapers ever in most of the countries ever printed anything about the Spanish flu, including American newspapers. But Spain wasn't in the war. Spain was a neutral. So their newspapers printed all kinds of stuff, and it made people think that the flu started there. But no, it started in Kansas, in the state of Kansas. And we took it to Europe because we were shipping troops, hundreds of thousands of American troops were going over to help win the First World War, but they brought the flu with them and took the flu with them, and and then all of Europe came down. Then the flu came back to the United States in even a more virulent form. So that's the one that's interesting. I've done quite a bit of reading about that epidemic, or the pandemic, really. And the interesting thing is that just like the coronavirus pandemic, it's a virus that is new to humans, and we have no defenses for it. So it was very contagious, running through the population, and we took the same measures as we've taken this time, what we call mitigation measures. You can't stop the flu. There are no drugs for it. And no vaccine for it. That's the same as now.
Yeah.
And so most cities, when they finally realized that the flu was coming, and this would have been the second wave, because the first wave kind of went by without much fanfare. Then the second wave came at us came in from Europe, when our troops came back from Europe, and it was very violent, very virulent. It killed a lot of people. The cities did the same thing that we're doing today. Social distancing, closing schools, banning meetings, telling people to stay home. I mean, all the things that we're doing today, we did then. Yeah. And the lessons that come out of that are interesting, because there are some lessons that come out of it. First, those cities, and the only data we have is from cities. We don't have any big national data, particularly from other countries, so we can compare. But the cities that put on these social distancing, these mitigation things, the quickest, and made them last the longest, are the cities that did better in terms of infections, in terms of deaths, and in terms of economic recovery. So these mitigation factors can still be effective, but they've got to be put on very quick. They've got to be put on to stay a long time, and they have to be how shall we say, opened up. The cities have to be opened up, and the country in this case has to be opened up in a slow and very measured way. This is the fight we're having now in the United States over whether to open up and how fast and in what way. And there are a lot of our experts. I don't consider myself the expert. I'm just the guy who's read a lot of history about it. But most of our experts say that we're doing it too soon, and it's going to cause a big second wave. Okay. So that's it. Then, of course, just one slight mention of the biggest of all that I know of pandemics, which was the bubonic plague of the 14th century, which killed a third of the population and changed Europe in many very, very transformational ways because of the loss of mainly working class people. Yeah. That I won't go into, because your viewers are probably not interested in going back into the 14th century.
Yeah. Let's move on Bangladesh. As you are the most authoritative expert on South Asia, and you served as ambassador to Bangladesh. As you know, the country is in the highest risk in South Asia. The current regime was skeptical about it, and at the beginning, they were busy with celebrating Mujibiyar, and they hide the information. And in some points, they were attacking on the people who disclosed the fact. Now the situation is total mess. You know, the people are not getting any treatment from the hospital. They are not interested. They are not, supporting the patients, and people are suffering. People are dying without treatment, and they are deprived of food, essential materials. And surprisingly, I saw a news report on Washington Post, most probably you noticed that ruling party members, they are looting the relief materials, stealing this rice, the main food of Bangladesh. So, and poverty and unemployment is higher than ever. Obviously, it is around, globally, it's the main same problem. But how you are following the Bangladesh situation?
Well, you're much more conversant with it than I am. I will admit that. I have been reading about it to the extent that I can. I don't have the time or the sources that you do to know as much about it as you do. But I think that at the very beginning, when it first came, even before it really started uh, infecting people in Bangladesh, I think the government was making mistakes in the sense of hiding information from people, because one of the things we learned again from this 1918 epidemic is that transparency, complete and total transparency, is the best method of getting people to do the things they need to do to avoid its really fast spread. So my understanding is that the government didn't give people very much information, if any. They tended to downplay it, just like the Trump administration did. And the first thing they know, they've got a situation that's close to out of control. And the second thing I think I understand is that they're basically hiding the numbers, hiding the real truth of what's going on. Now, I mean, Bangladesh is a poor country, and I'm not quite sure what the best. I know that the best policy would be total transparency, and trying to prevent people from gathering because that's where the spread comes. I don't know how you do that in a country like Bangladesh. They've got it's a serious problem. We've got enough of a problem in our country, but I feel very sorry for the people of Bangladesh, because I don't think they're getting very good leadership. That's all.
Yeah. So government is in zero tolerance on freedom of expression. I mean, Bangladesh government.
Yes, I know that.
Already ICT Act is there. Besides, they issued a memo to control the social media and free speech. And within this pandemic time, a total of 60 cases have been filed against more than 100 people, including 22 journalists, under the act between January 1st to May 6th this year, according to Article 19, the UK-based human rights report. And the foreign minister of Bangladesh criticizes the Western diplomats while they are expressing concern on press freedom. Alice Wells, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, Bureau of South and Central Asia, expresses her concern in Twitter. In reply, Dr. Mohammed said it is disappointing and unacceptable. And he questioned about US press freedom situation. And he said, no freedom of speech in America. He was talking to the German-based news network, DW. So what you will say? Do you agree with that?
Of course I don't. Of course I don't. My first response is that the foreign minister ought to talk to his counterpart in the United States. I mean, the Trump government is calling the press its enemy because the press is so free. The press is being hypercritical, correctly, of the administration, or at least everything except the part of the press that is very pro-Trump, which is mainly the Fox News side. But of course, I don't agree with it. I think in human rights, particularly freedom of the press, is really being terribly trampled on in Bangladesh, and I'm very sorry about that.
Yeah, many reporters are in jail now.
And in fact, it leads to the thing I was saying, which is that without the facts, you're not going to be able to defend against the coronavirus as well as you should be able to. People need all the facts to know how to do it, and they're not getting them, obviously.
Yeah, because not only the reporters, but some people are expressing their concern in the social media, Facebook, they are,
Yeah.
so they even they are not tolerating this kind of criticism, very simple criticism. Many of our colleague reporters there is in jail, and the normal, I don't know even many people they are, when they are, just posted something in Facebook, and government is not happy, and the next day, the police is going to arrest them. So this is happening in the country with this pandemic time. It's very
Yeah.
unfortunate. Yeah.
Yes, and it's really too bad because on top of all the difficulties that people of Bangladesh have these days with coronavirus, as well as the economic impact of coronavirus, which I don't we ought to not certainly won't forget to mention, because I gather that the export side of a Bangladesh economy has really gone flat. The garment exports are way down, and so the earnings are way off, and a lot of people have been thrown out of work. So it's and so the Bangladesh people have a serious weights upon them, and then to have this sort of attack on their freedoms, particularly their freedom of information, is really despicable.
Yeah. So what will be the end result after the pandemic? How the world will look like after devastating outbreak?
That's anybody's guess. I really don't know. It won't look like the world that was there before the pandemic, I think. There is a lot of fear, and I'm one of those who shares this fear, that we will have a long, drawn-out economic and very slow economic recovery, which will change, and that will change economic structures in a lot of countries. Countries like Bangladesh, which were dependent on exports, may lose their markets and never get them back. I don't know. I mean, I hope that's not true, but it's a possibility. So the shape of the post-pandemic world is still, I think, very, very unclear. And I think the only thing we can do, rather than speculate about what the world might look like, is to try to make sure that this pandemic is vanquished, if you will, that there's a vaccine and that people become immune to the pandemic as quickly as possible. And that's, of course, what I think is happening now, but it's not happening. It hasn't really taken off in the United States, and I don't know. I'm not conversant enough with the situation in South Asia to know whether South Asia sees an opening that it's a way out yet, or not. I wouldn't have thought so, given the numbers I see from both India and Bangladesh and Pakistan, by the way, all of which have pretty heavy doses of the coronavirus still moving through their societies.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ambassador William B. Milam. It is a wonderful conversation, and we will keep continuing this type of conversation. And I will be happy to have you.
I'm honored that you've asked me, and I'm very happy to be on with you. And you are a very good questioner. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.